of Delaware, excuse me, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and the Judiciary Committee. Senator, you're very close with the Biden family, so talk to us first about what you think was persuading the president after the election to pardon his son. We know how he feels about Hunter and how important family is, but why didn't he say so before the election is one of the questions being asked by some of his Democratic allies.
Well, Andrea, there's a lot going on in the world I hope we'll get to today in South Korea and Angola. But to your question, what the panel was just discussing with you, the nomination of folks like Kash Patel to be director of the FBI, Matt Gaetz to be attorney general, I think weighed heavily on the president. And so despite repeatedly saying he would not pardon his son, he looked at these two and said Trump's campaign rhetoric that he would use the levers of power of the federal government to go after his political opponents and enemies, he concluded that that was certain to happen. He wasn't hearing strong opposition from members of the Senate to the nomination of Kash Patel. For example, someone who in a book he published literally included a list of enemies. And the idea that his son, who is now several years sober, has repaid all of the taxes that he failed to pay with fines and fees, and was on the verge of pleading guilty in an arrangement in front of a federal judge in Delaware just a few months ago. The idea that he might be sent to prison, I think, weighed very heavily on the president. As a father, I can understand his reasoning, given this change in circumstances. I am concerned about what's going to happen to the scope of the pardon power going forward. And I do think, given what's happening right now today in South Korea, we as a Senate need to look hard at our constitutional role as the advise and consent body. Lots of folks have been proposed for nomination to key posts by President-elect Trump. As you were just discussing, Pete Hegseth is currently making his way around the Capitol to meet with Republicans inclined to support him. But his conduct, his leadership of a veterans organization, his having been driven out of that role, and questions about the appropriateness of him being in charge of the most powerful and lethal military in the world, I think will simply continue. President-elect Trump, forgive me, has proposed he will nominate Marco Rubio, a seasoned and capable senator, to be Secretary of State. He's got an alternative in Senator Joni Ernst, who he could put forward to be Secretary of Defense, and I suspect she'd be confirmed quickly. In the previous Trump administration, I'll remind you, his nominee for Secretary of Defense was Jim Mattis, a four-star Marine Corps general with decades of experience leading troops in combat, managing very large parts of the Department of Defense, obviously the Marine Corps, and he got 98 votes, I believe, for confirmation. If President-elect Trump puts forward qualified, capable leaders for the important pieces of our national security and our federal government, he'd get bipartisan support. What's happening right now feels more like a casting call for a reality TV show than proposing serious folks to lead in this really critical moment in our world.
Well, you've alluded to what's happening in South Korea. Obviously, the Middle East is a tinderbox. The president-elect has threatened Hamas with, very tough action if they don't release hostages. So he seems to be taking the world stage. He's going to Paris this weekend, meeting with other leaders there. He seems to be overshadowing President Biden, even as President Biden is on this very important trip to Angola. But well, are you concerned that with the Republican majority, that Pete Hegseth, who is very controversial, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, that they will be confirmed, that the Democrats don't have the political clout right now, and that the pardon might actually take some of the attention away from the points they're trying to make?
Look, at the end of the day, these confirmation hearings will happen in mid to late January and February. And between now and then, my hope is that my Republican colleagues will reflect on the critical role that they play here in the Senate. Our framers in the Constitution gave senators the power of advice and consent over judges, over ambassadors, over members of the cabinet and senior government officials for a reason, to make sure that presidential overreach, such as may be happening in South Korea, Korea right now has a legislative check and balance. And simply asking fair and reasonable questions about their policy views, their qualifications, what they would do with these agencies is an important part of any confirmation hearing. And so Democrats and Republicans here in the Senate should be willing to meet with all nominees to conduct themselves in swift and responsible confirmation hearings, but to be clear about who should and shouldn't be leading these important agencies. Andrea, if we can't get 4 Republicans to be willing to do that job, I'm very concerned about the path forward and what might happen to our nation in the year ahead.
Chris Coons, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.